Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Naomi Pilling. Hi, Naomi, how are you?
Hiya, I'm fine, thank you.
And we're going to explore art, potentially as specific as primary art. But I thought, as your first time on the podcast, it might make a bit of sense to begin with a bit about who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, sure. I qualified late to be a primary teacher actually, and did various other things before that, but really came into primary teaching because I was interested in teaching art. And so qualified as a generalist and did, general classroom teaching, and then was lucky enough to get a job as a specialist art teacher, which I did for quite a few years before my role now is writing curriculum and doing teacher training with teachers to guide them best about how to teach art as is one of the things I concentrate on. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. I mean, that must be wonderful being able to follow your passion in that way. I suppose lots of primary teachers do, but very specific.
Yeah, absolutely. It was specific. I always said to my head, this is actually after I've been in the job for a few years, this is like my dream job to be teaching art all the time. I mean, it's a full-on job because you've got resources all the time, and I was going from class to class teaching a lot of children, and it was an unusual job because of course in primary schools now you don't really get specialist art teachers. So my passion now really is passing that kind of knowledge about teaching art on to general primary school teachers who want to teach it well and as treat it seriously as a subject. Yeah.
Everyone listening knows that as soon as you even just scratch the surface of art, you realize help is something that I think I certainly would openly welcome in terms of it, because you want to make sure that you're giving pupils the opportunity to really understand the subject and the domain, but also on a technical level, but also on the depth of the richness of the knowledge available.
Absolutely. I think and it's one of those areas where people have a lack of confidence about their teaching in it. So, and I always think, a little bit of knowledge can go a long way, and enthusiasm, for it can go a long way. So, yeah, absolutely. And it's such an important subject, I think, it's a subject that we encountering the visual is not something that we do a lot in schools in other areas. So it does come up in English if you're talking about visual literacy, but and sort of bouncing ideas off the visual in English, but as a subject in its right, I obviously think it's so important.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of conversation about whether, like, I mean, slightly adjacent, but record companies will need musicians after a while. And I think as a vehicle for expression and sort of, I don't know, the unofficial record of our
Yeah.
existence on this planet, it's a bit more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting actually. I was listening to somebody talk recently, actually in relation to music rather than art, but about AI and, are we going to need anybody to, do all of this stuff in the future to create music, to create art, because, computers can do it. We can give them information and then they can do it. And what this person said, who was an expert in AI and was talking about it, really interestingly, I thought, but he said, what my pupils want to do, when he was talking about music technology, is that they want to be the creators. That is why he said, I don't think that AI will take over from in relation to music, but also I would think in relation to art as well, because that's, to me, that's a fundamental part of art, is the passion and our sort of human need to create. That's not going to go away. That's what we want to do as human beings. So, big stuff that, but that's what I feel. So I don't think AI is not going to push that out.
No, not at all. I mean, obviously there are a lot of subjects, a lot of domains sort of vying for competition in the primary curriculum. Are there any other reasons why art as a subject is important and should be given the time? I think it's pretty clear what side of the fence we sit on, but for anyone
Yeah.
who's not convinced, what should they be considering?
Yeah, I mean, so that first thing that I was just talking about, creation, I think is really important. It's it, it's as I said, I think it's fundamental to us as human beings, but also because we get a lot of pleasure from creating in lots of different ways. I mean, I would say that, you know, sort of that would apply, for instance, to sport as a thing as well. You know, we're in a sense we're creating something. You know, if we take part in sport or dance or those things, but in relation to art, we get pleasure from that. And my other really big thing about and why I'm passionate about teaching art in schools is what lots of people call our visual literacy and developing that. So it's really developing our capacity to look and to I always say to sort of take notice, to look closer at the world, and that with your sort of teacher head on, and you think, okay, so why is that useful in life? It's really, really important for thinking, critical thinking, for developing vocabulary, for developing language, and expression. But also, I think it's really in the age when we talk about social media and the presence of that, and the fast world of flicking through your phone and looking at Instagram and all of that, looking and developing that skill of looking and talking about what you're looking at is really important for our mental health. I really think it helps your mental health to look closer, to think carefully, perhaps a lot more slowly about what you're looking at. And it's interesting, actually, in the art world generally, there's this movement for what people call slow looking. So I don't know whether if you go to a gallery and what you'll see most of the time is people walking from picture to picture. There's been research on about how much time people spend looking at the little blurb by the side. They spend more time reading the blurb by the side than they do than looking at the picture. And they'll move on from thing to thing to thing. And the sort of movement for slow looking takes a different attitude to looking, and says, right, no, we're going to stop, we're going to look, we're really going to consider what we see. And a lot of the work I've done with children in terms of like the nuts and bolts of lessons, that is my real, I mean, as well as creation, that's my real sort of passion, is encouraging children to look and to think about that. And the other thing is in relation to what we learn when we look at art is it's completely mind expanding. Because when you're thinking about looking at art, you're thinking about, well, if you're looking at somebody else's creation, whether it's Leonardo da Vinci, whether it's Tracy Emin, you're thinking about how do other people see things? How does this person see something? And that's tremendously exciting, I think, because how's that different to me, and how can I say to the world that I see something? Whether it's abstract or drawing an apple in front of me. And I would say getting children to look at other people's art, and a huge range of it, is really important to introduce them to this wonderful world of how other people see. Yeah, that was a very long-winded answer.
I think it was a fantastic answer. I think slowing down is something that's on my mind all the time.
Yeah,
How to avoid the traps of social media, two young children,
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
bring them into this world and stuff. And So I think that reason alone, even if you put aside all the other fantastic things that come with them, the sort of art in general, the fact that we can train ourselves to survive in a, I don't know, what is it, post-industrial world? I don't know.
Yeah. There's yeah, there's we have to slow down and look. And it's important for our imagination. Um, that's such a crucial thing to expression and using your imagination, and what a gift it is to work with primary school children, because you're never far away from that. That's at the surface when you're working with them. And it's in the bluster of a normal primary school day. It's sort of easy, isn't it, to forget all of that. We've got to get through the maths. We've got to uh, we've got to get through the English, etc. Which is also creative, but in a different way. Yeah, yeah.
If you know what you're looking at, it's easier to slow down.
Yeah.
And that comes from sort of the people's experience in school. What are
Yeah.
your guiding principles for the teaching of art?
Well, so I mean, it really comes down to those two things we've been talking about already. It's taking time to look and taking time to create. So looking at a range of art. I mean, it's interesting because the research review for art, which was the Ofsted Research Review, is one of the later ones to come out, and it talks about that encounter and looking, and it talks about presenting a range of things that children look at, and it actually quite. I mean, I think it was a good document, and it talks about the traditional, the modern, and the contemporary. So looking, introducing children to that range of things, and it's interesting what when you look. There would be various sort of techniques that I would use in the classroom, and that I think are good practice. And the first of those is to actually get over that barrier that so many people have of looking at art and think we as adults think, I don't know what I'm looking at, and I don't know what to say about this. Now, children, and primary school children in particular, are really fantastic at doing this, because if you give them the freedom and you ask them open questions to start with and say, well, just tell me what you see. And that sounds so simplistic, but tell me what you see. And you will start delving into what you are looking at, without them being nervous about, well, what should I be saying that I see? We as adults have that nervousness, but and well, is it this sort of style we think as as adults? Is it this, or I don't know anything about art, so I can't say what I can see, but anybody can say what they see. I see blue, I see green, I see the shape of a dog, whatever it is. And then I often say to teachers, to say, then when you've delved in that way, you can then start to sort of probe with other questions, because often children, of course, do go off piste and say, I mean, I love it with the reception when you say, what can you see? And they give you crazy answers, which can often be, but sort of saying to them, well, why are you saying to me, say with an abstract picture, that you can see a dog here? And then, so that's then using their understanding of the fact that that shape, for instance, tells them that, or that color tells them that, or that brush stroke tells them that it looks fluffy, or whatever it is. And not, sort of, I would also say, to them, generally, well, why do you say that? Because you're really looking from them for evidence about what they're saying. So those sort of wild suggestions that you can get, is it then taking that more into critically thinking about why they say what they say. So really taking that time to encounter and to look and to not be afraid. Talking about reception as well. I would sit with children and say, well, I'm going to give you. I'm going to let you look, and I'm going to let you look for 20 seconds, and we're going to be completely quiet, and then you're going to tell your partner what you see, and then you're going to tell me, so that they have that opportunity to think. And 20 seconds is not long, is it? But if you're a teacher and you've got a load of 4-year-olds in front of you, it's actually it's a long time. So giving them that time, to look, and then so my that's one of my obsessions, is looking and giving them time to look. But then moving on to then I would always go from this guiding principle of looking and then creating, looking and talking, and creating. Obviously, there are things that you're going to be, that you as a teacher, using hopefully a really good curriculum, you're going to be teaching certain things from what you've looked at. At its simplest level, you might be looking at a painting that uses the primary colours, and that's going to be your focus. So having a really clear idea that, okay, so that's the sort of, that's going to be part of my direct instruction. And I would always do looking before coming back to direct instruction, which is, like I talk to my colleagues about this, because who are not art specialists, but that encounter first of all is important. And then that, okay, so we're looking at this picture by this person, and they have used 3 primary colors here. And the primary colors are, red, yellow, and blue. So, and then creating from that, going into your creating from that. And one of my other really, I as a, I'm an artist as well, and I always think that in art, process, the doing, is as important as the outcome. And that's difficult for children to understand, and I think difficult for a lot of teachers and parents to understand, that we're always looking for outcomes, aren't we? I want my picture to look like what it's supposed to, or what I imagined it to, but trying to recognize as a teacher that the process is really important, and that and them actually doing that creating is really important. And so that, and the way that you're going to give your students confidence about doing that process, and this is one of my other things, is modeling, is showing them what to do. So as a primary school teacher, with whatever you think your level of, whatever your hang-ups about your own artistic ability, is to always show them, and to show them with the same materials that you are expecting them to use. That sounds mad, because why wouldn't you show them with the same materials? If we're painting, I'm going to show them how to, what to do to paint. But I've seen lots of teachers, say you're doing pencil work or something, then showing the kids what to do on a whiteboard with a slippy whiteboard pen. But it's not, it's different. It feels different. It'll have a different effect. So really modeling to them what they need to do, and really trying not to, as a teacher, not to be afraid of doing that. And that develops as a primary school teacher, of course. That develops your relationship with them. They see you have a go, and being really specific about what you want them to do when you're doing it. So there's, yeah, so taking time to look, and in that creation, really showing them, modeling. Which of course we wouldn't say to kids, go and just write this essay or write this, do this maths or whatever, without showing them first of all. And I think there's the temptation, perhaps with a subject which we're not confident about, to say, okay, just go and get on with it. So we so that modeling is really important.
You mentioned direct instruction and creativity, and
Yeah,
there's a certain school of thought that would sort of posit that they operate in juxtaposition to each other. What do you say when you get
yeah.
pushback against that?
Interesting, because I think that there are lots of bits of the art world and sort of art teaching that sort of don't like that idea of direct instruction. But I think it comes back to thinking about, what are you teaching? So if I'm saying to kids, this picture is by this painter, Mondrian, then I'm going to tell them that. That doesn't hamper their that doesn't hamper their creativity. But also, in relation to what I've just been talking about, direct instruction in relation to skills of what they're doing, the skill of learning how to paint is important. So that is, direct instruction. I'm showing them, these are the conventional ways to hold your brush, the conventional ways to get paint on your paintbrush, to mix your colors. Now, I think where people get unstuck with this idea is that they think, well, but if you're showing them that that's definitely the way you do it, then what happens then to their creativity? And I think, in my mind, all the way through the course of the history of art, you want people to use, sometimes using established techniques, to learn them, to then be able to depart from them if they want to. And I think a good primary curriculum and good teaching of art marries those two things. So for instance, if you are teaching a load of year ones to about tints and shades, so making colours lighter, making colours darker, you're going to show them how to do that, and using pigment and paint and their brush. And so that they don't, say, mix lots of colours and get muddy colours that they don't want. So they've got that knowledge from and capability from your direct instruction about how you do that. That doesn't mean that they can't then use those colours to create an expressive, say, water scene. If you're using light blues and dark blues themselves, to create their own picture. It doesn't also mean that they can't say, well, actually, I want a muddy mixture to create, the what the tops of the waves will look like. But you've given them the facility to start with. You've given them the knowledge, the understanding to start with about how they do it. So very much, in my mind, they go hand in hand. That, there's, interestingly, so my daughter did art A level, and she said to me, while she was doing it, what I find frustrating, Mum, is that there's all sorts of stuff I've never been shown how to do. Nobody's ever told me this is the accepted way that you paint with watercolors, so I feel like I can't use them properly. Now, you can do that by exploration, but why, I don't think you're hampering somebody by showing them how to do that in the first place. I don't think you're hampering their creativity. I think there's, absolutely a place for it. And actually, going back to the art research review, the Ofsted research review, it talks about that. It talks about, creating spaces where, you can do, you can teach these things, and expect children to sort of do what they call convergent, have convergent outcomes, where their outcomes will look much the same in a class full of children because they've used the same techniques to create a picture, but then divergent outcomes. So giving them the freedom, that's like outcomes which will be. So I'm asking you to create an abstract painting, say, and say, so you've done work on it. We know that abstract means what it means, and different. We've looked at different abstract paintings, and showing them, modeling, say, well, this is how I think I would go about it, and showing them how you would go about it. Then taking that example away and saying to them, right now, what do you do? So that creates a much more an outcome which is going to be different across the class. So the review talks about the importance of and balance of both of those things. And certainly as an artist, I think that's really important, that you have the balance. Art's governed by materials. You're working with materials, and it's useful to know how they behave. It's frustrating for a child if you don't show them how to stick clay together, and then when you come back, if you put it in a kiln, then it's blown up because you didn't fix it together properly, or if you were using air dried clay, as you would, most primary schools would do, you come back next week and it's all falling apart. That's frustrating. So you want that knowledge, that understanding of how your materials work, to be able to do that, and then to use your creativity. So yeah, it's a thing that I think a balance in my view.
Yeah, it's always really fascinated me. Is that fascinate the right word? But art in particular seems to be a subject where the discourse is can get quite heated because people but I think even the term masterpiece, what a masterpiece is,
Yeah,
denotes a whole lot of learning in advance. So I'm very much in the you've got to know the rules before you can bend the rules kind of camp. But
yeah,
as you mentioned them, I thought, oh, I definitely want to hear what your thoughts are on this.
yeah. You know the rules before you bend them. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and sometimes you might want to bend, sort of, give a child an opportunity to express what's there in their imagination before you sort of, say, right now we're going to look at this and teach you about how to use your pencil, allow them to explore and use their pencil in a certain way, and then talk about, well, you could use cross-hatching to make something darker, or you could use shading to make something darker, and allow them that imaginative um, uh, exploration first. That there's I think as long as there is that balance there in the end, that uh, in a subject like art, exploring your materials is fine, and particularly with young children. For them, understanding that, say, handling clay, and how lots of them might have done that before, and how that feels, and for children with special needs to encounter all that sensory stuff, can be important to do that perhaps before you teach them about what we're going to do with this. So I think there is absolutely room for flexibility of approach. That doesn't mean that you don't use that direct instruction, within um, within a lesson, within an art lesson.
What does a typical lesson look like when you're teaching art?
Well, I mean, it would. In my mind, it would have, and the way I would teach would have those ingredients that you've got, that we've been talking about, that you've got looking at other people's art. You have got it, direct instruction and modeling about what children should do, and you've got creation. So it has those elements in it. Um, and I would, I mean, there's a debate about, I think, to be had about what order you do those things in a typical art lesson. I I personally think that it's in all subjects. You're going to be following those things that are that we have sort of come to, that are good in teaching. Following those Rosenstein's principles of thinking about all those things that we would think about with that. Retrieval. So um, and then direct to teaching and practice, and asking lots of questions. Asking lots of questions in the art classroom are really important when you're looking and you're talking about art, but also when you're creating. So so in my classroom, we would start with retrieval. We would go, well, so what, it might be something you've looked at before. What do we remember about this? What colors does this artist use? What can you tell me about those colors? Or shape or composition, if you're looking for, higher up the primary end, how was this person arranged these different things in this picture? So we're looking at retrieval, then going on to looking. I mean, I always like looking and encountering that piece of art, a piece of art, or whatever you're looking at, before direct instruction. Because I think what happens with art, if you give any kind of, often, not always, but if you say, right, this is the piece of art you're looking at, it was made in 1863, it's by blah blah blah, there is a certain sense to which there will be a sort of lot, what's the phrase, a sort of, children stop looking. It's like you're giving them information, and so right, now's the learning, and we're not going to investigate with our eyes. I always think investigating first with your eyes before sort of talking, saying, okay, this is whatever you want, whatever knowledge you want to impart to them about what they're looking at, is good practice. You can run into trouble with that, with misconceptions about creating misconceptions. And I think you need to be careful about not creating misconceptions, because children will sometimes latch on to what they thought, or another child has said, and then sort of run with that, and not, and that might actually in the end be incorrect. So to be careful to whatever the message or the learning from the lesson is that you want to impart, really getting that across. But I would always advocate looking first, so you don't shut down the conversation and the detailed looking. And and as I've said, always within an art lesson, having that element of demonstration, modelling from the teacher, before they create. Desktop cameras are great for that. Not always, not that doesn't always work, but showing, yeah.
Visualizers for live modeling are fantastic, aren't they?
Yeah,
Because I mean, they're inexpensive. Certainly the sort of the entry level ones are relatively inexpensive,
yeah,
and they do the job. And then obviously you can get more technical as you go through the
yeah.
bands.
And I always find with children that actually that part of the lesson, they'd be absolutely completely glued to what you were doing. And I think I always think it's really important to be specific when you're modeling. So, with young children in particular, well, what way around is my paper? or say you're working with clay, well, like, you know, I've got a wooden board here that I'm putting the clay on, and that's so it doesn't stick to the table, because that's frustrating. You've got like 6-year-olds, you know, trying to get their clay off the table. And you know, that's that specificity really, really important, because that empowers them to then, you know, to create. So and that's, you know, that's what you want to be doing.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see Alex speak at Research Aid Cornwall, and she showed a video of some art teaching, and the specificity was fantastic because it was like, you know, which way do I put my page? Where do I start on the page? Because that's a big one in art.
Yeah. Do you start in the middle or at the top or at the bottom? Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I was like, okay, I wish I'd known this when I started teaching.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, you know, it's one of, I mean, I certainly learned, you know, you on the job that, you know, how you would get these, you know, how you did this and get your best outcomes, from the children, when you're doing that. I think the other thing I suppose I should mention also is when I think we have a tendency as teachers, when we've done that teaching bit front, and then they're doing what they're doing, they're creating, which, as I said, is, you know, that, I mean, is, you know, is absolutely really immensely important in the art classroom. But I think we have a tendency as teachers then to think, oh, phew, right, switch off now. I've done my bit. Now they're doing their bit. But actually, that bit is so important, because that's where they're going to really learn those skills, when you or your TA, or, you know, however you run your classroom, is walking around and saying, okay, so you're using the watercolor like this, and you're pulling your brush nicely across the page, so we've got smooth brush strokes, but it's still looking a bit sort of scratchy. Why do you think that is? Oh, well, maybe I haven't got enough water. Okay, on my brush. Okay, so we're going to get some more water on your brush. So that specificity when you're talking to them, and that might be talking to them about if they're creating something from their imagination, you know, well, what are you doing here? That visual literacy whilst they're creating, when they're doing their own thing rather than looking at somebody else's work, you know, as important. So not having our cup of tea moment and switching off and sitting at our desk, but, you know, to go around and have a, you know, to be really engaged with what they're doing as they're doing it, because that is when they will do their best learning, you know, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. When they're getting specific feedback to their
Yeah.
developmental points or whatever, you know, I think that makes total sense. I mean, that sounds fantastic. I mean, I wish I was in your art class, but I know that, say, for instance, my very first class, they would not have enjoyed, I don't think, the art as much. How can we support others in improving their teaching of art?
Yeah. Um, so I think really the really important thing is to have a good curriculum that you're working through. Um, and so, you know, so not so, and, you know, because it's a subject which is often seen as an add-on and often a Friday afternoon subject, whatever, that it won't get that focus. But really having a well, you know, structured, well sequenced curriculum, is important, and the one that blends those things that I've been talking about. So I always talk about, you know, the sort of different areas of knowledge or skills or whatever. I mean, in my head, the skills and knowledge are all mixed up to do with that, but because I think it all overlaps. But so you're talking about introducing children to art and artists, to concepts to do with art. So people talk about the elements of art. So looking at line, say, shape, color, these different things which make up art. So And then the skills that they learn and the processes that they use. So a good curriculum blends these things together. And so you know, that my biggest advice for, you know, senior leaders is to and therefore, you know, to make art in a good place in their school with their staff is to use a good curriculum, whether it's a curriculum that they've created themselves or one that they, you know, that they get from somewhere else. And then really to, in terms of support, I think, you know, I've talked about all these things before, but thinking about, well, what's really important in the art classroom, and what, as then supporting the teaching in those areas. So questioning is, you know, really important. I mean, questioning as a teacher, of course, is like, you know, really important. But thinking about often using those open questions first, so children have an opportunity to look, to express themselves about what they're seeing, and then narrowing it down to less open questions and to you know, specific questions about what they see. So really concentrating on, in the classroom, having those, knowing what you're asking. I always have on my whiteboard, you know, the questions, because they were such a crucial part of looking. So and you know, using that, so providing that vehicle for discussion, and then really, as you know, senior leaders and supporting people to understand and to practice modeling, and showing children what, you know, what they're doing, and see, you know, seeing as that as a focus. So, you know, having a staff meeting on it, you know, how are we going to do this well? What really specific things can we take away from this? And then that, and then also, you know, that sort of using that formative, I suppose what we call formative assessment, you know, when we're going around the classroom, as I was talking about, you know, talking to children about what they're doing, how are they achieving what they're achieving, is there anything else they should be doing, you know, so to really, I suppose those three things, as a teacher, you know, if you're in personal development, the questioning, the modeling, that then formative assessment, questioning in the moment while they're doing things, as a teacher concentrating on those things, but also you know, as middle senior leaders, looking for those things, because it's those things which will, if you know, if you're, I mean, I said a process in art isn't as important as outcomes, but of course we're always, you know, people are always looking for outcomes. So, you know, so people will say to me, well, why are our outcomes not, why do these books or these sketchbooks, whatever, don't look like I want them to look? Why are they not achieving what I'm hoping them to achieve when they've finished whatever they're doing? And that often, you know, can be traced back to not showing them what actually to do. So, you know, concentrating on those things so that you do see those outcomes that you want. Yeah.
So you've almost, once you put the journey in place, and it's a really high quality journey with all the sort of key elements, it's then about, well, what systems and can I put in place to help my teachers get to the point where they're executing this proficiently, or they're enacting this, to use Arnold's proficiently. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And of course, in art, there's so much of the practical. You know, you're thinking about, as I said earlier on, you're thinking about materials. And I mean, I should say, you know, would absolutely advocate that. Don't be. I think so many primary teachers are frightened of the materials because they're messy, and that's irritating, and that's draining as a teacher to be dealing with 37-year-olds with with blue, white, and black paint in their palettes, and and aprons and paper and water, and but actually, if we can, if you can, to use a range of materials, you're really giving the children a, 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 a fantastic gift of beginning to understand these materials, because actually in the primary, if you think about it, it's so important in the primary classroom to give them that, because if you think about it, when they get to secondary school, they might have 3 years doing art. They might actually only have 2, depending on what how GCSE options are at work. They might at secondary school be taught on a carousel basis. I mean, everybody's trying to get away from that, but it might still happen. And if you compare that to the years you got with them at primary school, you've got them for those 7 years that that they can be doing an art lesson once a week, and exploring all this stuff. So that was a diversion. I know it's intimidating for lots of people, and I know, and it's messy, and that's frustrating, and for lots of people it's not their natural habitat. I love mess, but but it's not that, they find that difficult. And I suppose I would say, put it actually, it's really about practical systems. So try and work out what are those practical systems which make that easier for you, so that the children can have that encounter. So can you do it, can you do your art lesson after, say after a period where you've had a quiet lesson where the children are sort of getting on with stuff, so you can, or your TA, or can be getting all those resources ready, and then they have the resources ready. Can you, so that then they get all of that opportunity to use them. Primary teachers are brilliant at doing all that stuff because we wear so many hats. But it's just trying to make your life easier with that practical thinking, and all of that stuff about they're sitting there with all this stuff in front of them that they can fiddle with, and not listen. I would often, I think in the art classroom you have to be quite a strict disciplinarian because because otherwise you don't have you don't have their engagement and their attention if they're busy unrolling the sellotape, and so show me your hands. put, your, put your hands on your knees, or hands on your head, or let's have a movement break, because you want you in those short periods when you're giving them that instruction, or you're having that conversation, when you're looking, you want you want that attention. So yeah, sounds quite strange.
I mean, just thinking back to I'm pretty sure my whole class was given a 3-page essay on perspective, for not giving our full attention to the art lesson. So yeah, I think you're right.
I think like other practical subjects, it's hard. It's like music's hard as well for that reason. It's you've got these music, you've got these things that make sound, and so you have that, and I think having a consistent lesson structure, which you usually use there, which you are really familiar with, the children are really familiar with, and this is how always the art lessons run, is invaluable, because that allows you then the freedom to teach, and allows them the freedom to explore. You you your behavior man, you want your best behavior management. Well, we always want our best behavior management, but it's really important when you have so many materials.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, it can very easily get derailed very quickly. And then, yeah, we've already established how important it is. I really like what you said about natural habitat because it feeds into my final question because I know it can seem like that, but in my mind, I don't think there's anything that's beyond the reach of most people if they dedicate enough time to it. But imagine I'm a teacher who loves art, really wants to teach it well, but I don't feel good about my technical proficiency. That teacher who was,
Yeah.
you were imploring to demonstrate despite your own insecurities. You know, how can I get more proficient and more knowledgeable in the subject?
I think, well, I mean, I think using um, a good curriculum and understanding what you're teaching in that curriculum is really, really key. So, understanding if you're teaching a series of 6 lessons, say in half a term, um, really as a teacher, say you're teaching, I used the example of tints and shades earlier on. Well, what am I taught? What is my own knowledge about using tints and shades? Do I understand it? Do I understand how to create it? Do I understand how in the series of lessons we're going to use it? So using, really being on top of your curriculum, wherever it's, whatever the source is, and understanding how the skills which the children use and the the knowledge which they gain, how that builds, so as a subject leader, I would say to subject leaders, really understanding that throughout the whole of the curriculum that you're dealing with. But if you're a classroom teacher delivering lessons, understanding where that fits within the general pattern. If I've got year 3, well, so they were painting, say they were using oil pastels last year, where I'm going to look and see, well, how did they use them last year, and where's their knowledge, their understanding of using this particular medium got to? So where should they, all that prior knowledge, it's the same as in any other subject. Prior knowledge stuff, where has that got to? What am I doing now? And so what's my own level of knowledge and experience in relation to that? And a good curriculum should guide you through that. I mean, the other thing is, in terms of, asking for, if you want to improve, your art teaching, asking to do CPD about it, and to improve your skills in that way. I think it's, as I've said, unfortunately, it's a subject which is often sidelined, and I encounter it not being taught weekly in lots of cases, and that. So, but being bold and saying, this is my area of interest, and I want to improve my knowledge, and please give me some good CPD. Send me on some CPD, or let's have a staff meeting to investigate how do we do this. Can our art leader do to help us with understanding how say in the curriculum that we're using, how does painting develop from reception to year 6? What's the story of it? What's the story of how the skills and the understanding about it builds? It does come down to curriculum.
Oh, yeah, and listening to you speak and the sort of direction you're pointing things, I can't help but go back to, I spoke to Emma Leonard and Seamus Gibbons a couple of weeks ago, and I can see how this perfectly ties up with their thinking on what those very new teachers need to understand about how curriculum sequencing works and things like it. I think they're a really good compliment. I mean,
Yeah.
do you think the training has to be like connected to the curriculum, or the CPD has to be connected to the curriculum? Or I mean, because I imagine the work you do is with people who are bought into your way of thinking.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
reckon that's the best case scenario, or is it possible to just have really good art CPD and
Uh,
hope it matches?
I think it's possible to, of course, it's possible to have really good activity without it being uh, having a particular curriculum focus, a particular type of curriculum focus, I guess. Um, but I think it it should. My view is it should come down to those things which I've been talking about, which is learning how to guide to creation, looking, and then thinking about what you are looking at, that kind of that diverse range of stuff that you want children to encounter. So yeah, um, I think there's a a danger with a creative subject, that we somehow think, oh, creativity will just like kind of do it. But I mean, it's cut very clear from everything I've been saying, that's not that I don't think you learn anything that that now I think absolutely there's you should have masses of room for exploration and creativity in a subject like exploration in a subject like art, but it needs to have the backbone of what you're teaching children to do. So no, but there are absolutely, professional development, understanding about modeling, understanding about questioning, those those skills which, as a teacher should be your bread and butter. Very important.
I think what you've done so skillfully in this sort of short amount of time is really outline the nuance that I don't, it's why I enjoy this format so much. It's the nuance that's only possible, not really, doesn't lend itself to the written word, and certainly doesn't lend itself to the tweeted word. Uh,
Yes.
And so I think anyone listening will have a really clear idea about, or certainly I've got a clearer idea, but also about the complexity and the fact that
Yeah.
even though I perhaps set up these dichotomous situations with my questions, there that's not necessarily how the world works.
It's really nice to talk about it because I do a lot of training, and we have kind of models how we do, but it's nice to be a bit more freestyle and to sort of say everything that's in your head.
I know it'll be really valuable to lots of our listeners. And yeah, I'm really excited to share it. Yeah, I mean, the time is just gone in the blink of an eye. So hopefully you've enjoyed it enough that you'll join us again at some point for
I would definitely love to. It's been a real pleasure. Yeah.
fantastic. All that to do is say thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.